In this video, I'm going to give you a template for how to make your own Commander deck. First off, before we get into the numbers of this template, I wanted to go over a few things. So firstly, how did this template come to being? During the year of 2020, I analyzed over 1,000 different winning decks from free-for-all games in 4-player pods. I took the deck lists and then broke those decks down into several categories. The decks analyzed were predominantly from my own 3 different playgroups. All 3 of those playgroups are relatively casual. 2 of them are budget restricted, either playing 1DH or 2DH, including pre-constructed Commander decks. And then the other one is a little bit more open space, where players are bringing whatever kind of deck they feel like to the game. Other than my own playgroups, I also went online and watched games from other content creators, MTG Mudsta being the place I pulled the next most games from, simply because the feel of those games are the most similar or close to my own playgroups in that they are still towards the more casual side. Anyhow, I wanted to use 1,000 different games because I felt like that was a really large pool and we'd be able to get some good statistics from that. I looked at 6 different things, being lands, accelerants, cards that provide consistency, cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan, cards that assisted our own game plan, as well as the converted mana cost of cards in the decks. 2 of these categories we're going to explore deeper in a future video to come out, that being the land base as well as the removal package or interference package that we'll be running. So we'll look at more specifically the types of lands decks we're running, as well as the type of interference cards that decks were playing as well. I did categorize the other groups as far as, what type of accelerants decks were running, what kinds of cards that provided consistency decks were running, that sort of thing. But I feel like for deck building, those data points aren't necessarily super important, as they were more relevant to the deck strategy itself. Things that I'm assuming you already know how to play Commander. If not, this video isn't going to be much help to you. I suggest you maybe get into the game by buying one of the pre-constructed Commander decks that Wizards makes. Or if you like, you could check out one of the budget decks that I have here on my channel. It's pretty focused and will give you a good jumping off point. Otherwise, I'm assuming that you also understand that the things discussed in this video are generalities and not hard rules. And for our template, we're going to be using the median numbers from those 1,000 decks. So first off, we're going to talk about lands. In my future video, we'll discuss the 4 different types and what mono, dual, tri, and 4 or 5 color decks we're running. But the 4 kinds that I pulled into in my data were either basic lands, lands that provide multiple colors, fetch lands, as well as utility type lands. And there's an example of each of those there on the left hand side. Minimum number of lands any deck was running, any of the winning decks was running, should I say, was 35, and the greatest number any of the winning decks was running was 41. Surprisingly, the median number is also 41, and the whole top end, so the median number and above, was all running 41 lands. And I was actually really surprised by this, because if you remember from the analysis I did 2 years ago, the top end number I think was 43. The median number was maybe 39 or something like that. Anyhow, it's very much top heavy, and I had anticipated the numbers going lower in terms of how many lands winning decks were running. So I was a little bit surprised to see that there. Anyhow, 41 is our median number, so we're going to be trying to build decks with 41 lands as our starting point. Next up, we're going to look at our accelerants. There were 4 different types of accelerants, or things I put into the accelerant category. There are mana rocks like Mindstone, cards that help us get extra lands onto the battlefield like Rampant Growth, mana dorks like Land of War Elves, and then not really a true accelerant, but cards that help us fix our land base by searching out lands out of our deck like Pilgrim's Eye, putting them in our hand. I included in the accelerants category. Most decks didn't have very many of those anyhow, or even 0. But if a card came up when I was going through a deck list, I put that into this category. Lowest number any deck was running was 2, and then the high end was 27, our median number being 11. You can see there's a very large spread between the minimum and the maximum. This is going to hold true for the following categories because it really was dependent on what your deck was doing, and that's why we're using the median number for our template. Next up, we're looking at cards that provide consistency. This usually was in the form of card draw, like Read the Bones or Colossal Majesty, but could also come in helping us with card selection with cards like Tormenting Voice or Brainstorm. Minimum number a deck was running was 6, and the maximum number was 42. Our median number, which is what we'll be going with, is 17. Just like the last one, 42 is a really high number, and if I remember correctly, I believe that was a cantrip style deck where you're paying 1 mana or even 0 mana to play a card to draw a new card, and so that's why that deck had so many. It was getting lots of triggers off of those card draw type effects. Next up, we're going to look at our interference package. That was any cards that helped us remove or hamper and fiddle with our opponent's game plan. Could be cards like Return to Nature, which helps get rid of artifacts or enchantments. Mortify, which is a multi-target removal. It can get a couple different things for us. Something like the Plague Crafter, which will force our opponent to sacrifice something or discard a card, or even board wipe type effects like Aetherize. The minimum number a deck was running was 5. And then the maximum number we saw here was 37, which is really a lot. But our median number was 15 cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan. And then lastly, we'll look at cards that help assist our own game plan. A few examples are there on the left. Great Merchant of Asphodel can help us drain our opponents out. If we can reanimate, recur it, flicker it, something like that. Rampaging Baloths showed up quite a lot, especially in those landfall decks, obviously. Rootborn Defenses helps us to protect our own board, so it assists our game plan that way. And then Loxodon Warhammer just helps buff up your creatures, gives them trample or lifelink, and fits in with your game plan that way. These cards were ones that didn't really fit into any of the other categories, and so they're going to be specific to our game plan. 3 was the minimum number any deck was running here, very low. And then 48 was the maximum number that a deck was running. You're pretty much just focusing on what you're trying to do if that's your deck. The median number here was 16. And then lastly, we're going to look at the speed of your deck. I analyzed speed just based on the converted mana cost that you're running. And I anticipated, just like with the lands, that number would get lower. And it did here. I don't remember the exact number or the average CMC from 2019, but I know there was a significant rise in the number of 2-drops and a slight decrease in the number of 4, 5, 6, and 7 plus drops. When I was analyzing decks, it wasn't exactly 7, so I said 7 plus for a category, and that included 8, 9, 10, anything above 7. As well as cards with X in their converted mana cost. So if it was, 2 blue and X, then I said that was a 7 plus drop, which sometimes those cards are getting played for 5 mana or even 4 mana, whatever it might be. So a little bit of guesswork in analyzing the decks as far as their converted mana cost, but the median number is there on the graph, and then you can see the chart on the right hand side just to give you a guess if you want to kind of finagle but stay within some parameters of what other winning decks were doing. So in summary, a generic deck will include 41 lands, 11 accelerants, 17 cards that provide consistency, 15 cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan, and then 16 cards that assist our own game plan. Interestingly, that number just ended up being 100, but in analyzing decks, there were quite a few times where you would have lands that would fall into the consistency category or interference category or game plan category. So you get to finagle with the numbers a little bit, but if you want a generic starting base template for a deck, a good place to start before you start doing your own play testing, this would be a good place to begin building. I really enjoy jumping into statistical analysis, so this was fun for me. I'm not really sure how many hundreds of hours I put into finding these numbers. I hope to do it again for 2022. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you want to delve a little bit deeper into the land bases or what the interference package looks like, keep your eyes open for my next couple of videos coming out, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, I hope you have a great day. Peace. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell. That way, you won't miss any new content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right or either of the playlists on the bottom.